Ah, traveler, it's always good to see you. I have a tale, if you have time to listen.
Rodney couldn't win this fight, so something else stepped in. And now the Gravewarden is about to learn. There's more than one player in this body. Chapter 11. Player 2. Rod stepped through the graveyard without looking at the shadows anymore. They still moved. They still pressed in. They still whispered. But fear didn't reach him now. Fear slid off him like rain off oiled metal. His steps were slow, deliberate, firm, a hunter returning to familiar territory. The fog parted around him like it recognized something different inside him. Or perhaps it remembered what he had been a few minutes ago and sensed he no longer existed. His eyes were half-lidded, relaxed, unblinking as he passed the headstones. Each uneven stone, each toppled angel, each cluster of graves echoed with the memory of his first death, his second, his third. Rod didn't care. He stopped at the edge of the graveyard, where the path narrowed between two toppled monuments and the dead lay thickest. The short sword Rodney had looted, the chipped, barely functional thing he'd dragged through every fight, still hung at his hip. Functional. Familiar. Not enough. He crouched beside one of the fallen zombies near the path's edge. This one had come down hard, skull caved in, one arm folded beneath it at the wrong angle. The other arm still stretched outward, fingers loosely curled around the hilt of a second short sword, half buried in the dirt. Rod worked it free without ceremony. It was in worse shape than the first. Rust along the fuller, a nick near the tip where it had caught on something it shouldn't have. The grip wrap had unraveled down to bare tang along the bottom third. He held both blades out, one in each hand, turned them slowly. The weight wasn't matched, one slightly heavier at the pommel, one at the tip, but the difference was small, manageable. His wrists adjusted without being asked, finding the balance point in each, letting them settle into his palms like something that had been waiting to be held correctly. He rolled them once. Controlled. Easy. The rusted edges caught what little light the lantern offered and threw it back in thin, cold lines. Something settled in his chest. Not pride, not satisfaction. Rightness. This was how he thought. 2 lines of attack, 2 angles of pressure. One sword to redirect, one to punish. The graveyard had given him the first piece. Now it had given him the second. He rose, swords hanging loose at his sides, and kept walking. The lantern flame at his back whispered warmth, but he didn't turn toward it. He didn't need warmth. He needed victory. He needed progression. He needed to keep this life, keep this power, keep walking until he reached the goddess. She was the goal. The boss was just the wall. And Rod had broken better walls. He moved into the courtyard of the mausoleum again, stepping through the arch of fractured stone and into the open space where he had died screaming not long ago. He remembered the scream. Rodney had screamed. Rod did not scream. The air here was the same, cold, thin, waiting. The statues still watched him without eyes. The shattered stones still bore the marks of claws and impact. His blood, dark and dried, still stained the cracks he'd made when he hit the ground. Rod paused at the threshold of the courtyard, rolling both swords loosely in his hands one last time. The rusted blades twirled with lazy efficiency, each spin controlled, balanced. "This time," he murmured, "I do this cleanly." His voice was empty, flat, a blade without a whetstone. He walked into the arena. The knight sat exactly where it had before, slumped over the broken column, sword buried between its feet, shield resting against its leg. The same filth, the same rust, the same awful stillness. But this time, Rod didn't stop at the edge. He walked right at it. When he was 20 paces away, the first bell tolled. Rod didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He didn't adjust his stance. He simply exhaled through his nose like he'd been waiting for the sound. The knight twitched. Rod smiled. "You don't scare me anymore." The green fire lit behind the visor. Rod took another step. "You're just a dude in armor." The knight stood, dragging the sword free with a grinding scrape. Rod's grin widened. Not manic, but confident. Hungry. The knight raised its sword. Rod raised both his. "You're in my way." The knight stepped forward with its heavy, familiar rhythm. Thunk, thunk, thunk. But this time the sound didn't make Rod's pulse spike. It made his shoulders loosen. Predictable. Reliable. Heavy patterns. Rod moved. Not back. Not away. In. The knight's sword came down in a vertical arc, faster than a weapon of that size should fall. Rodney would have dodged sideways. Rod stepped into the attack, both swords crossing above his head. The steel trembled on impact but didn't collapse. Rod shifted his stance, turning his hips, letting the greatsword slide off his blades and crash harmlessly into the stone beside him. Sparks sprayed. The ground cracked. Rod didn't wait. He lunged. His right blade struck the knight's gauntlet, his left carved upward along the inner arm seam. He hit precise, surgical points, the joints Rodney had only accidentally found. He slipped past the knight's shoulder, striking 3 more times before it fully turned. The knight pivoted. Rod ducked under its shield bash, planted one foot against the broken column behind him, and used the rebound to clear the returning swing. He hit the ground in a low crouch and drove both blades into the knight's knee joint. Metal buckled. Rod rolled away as the knight staggered sideways, sword lashing out blindly. "Too slow," he whispered, rising into a backstep that left the blade slicing empty air an inch from his nose. The knight swung again, a broad horizontal cut. Rod shifted with it, letting the motion carry him past the deadliest part of the arc, then vaulted over the knight's shoulder and raked both blades across the top of its helm. The impact rang like a struck bell. Rod landed behind it, boots scraping lightly on stone. The knight turned. Rod was already in motion. Dual wielding let Rod create angles of pressure impossible with a single blade. One sword redirected the knight's attacks. The other punished the openings. He flowed through the fight, every strike a choice, every dodge a memory. When the knight thrust, Rod twisted sideways and carved into its ribs. When it raised its shield, Rod ducked under and slashed the hamstring. When it stomped, Rod jumped backward and came down blade first on its wrist plate. Rod was bleeding. Small cuts, one shallow slice on the thigh, but none of it mattered. His body responded like he had edited out hesitation itself. The knight swung its shield at his head, the same blow that had shattered Rodney's helm. Rod leaned back, letting the shield pass half an inch over his face, and smirked. Not this time. He stabbed upward. The blade buried itself in the visor slot. The knight reeled. Rod tore the blade free and hammered both swords into its chest, denting the plate inward, pushing it back step by step until it slammed against a toppled pillar. The force shook dust loose. Rod breathed in. Slow. Controlled. "Get up," he said. "We're not done." The knight did. Of course it did. It raised its greatsword for another crushing blow. Rod lowered his center of gravity and whispered, "Come on." The knight brought the blade down. Rod caught it. Both swords crossed above his head. He dug his heels into cracked stone, grit exploding under his boots as he redirected the force sideways. The knight stumbled as its strike slid wildly offline. Rod drove forward like a spear. He delivered a storm of strikes in seconds. Elbows, ribs, plates, gaps, all targeted. He didn't breathe between them. The final blow kicked the knight backward hard enough to send it tumbling into the dirt. Rod stood over it, chest barely rising, eyes bright. The knight rose one last time. Then the second bell tolled. Everything froze. Rod didn't speak, didn't inch closer, didn't blink. He simply lowered his swords to his sides and watched, his gaze traveling over the frozen figure with the detached interest of someone reading a mechanism they already understood. The way the armor sat too high on the shoulders, the faint green bleed at the joints, the hairline fractures running down the spine like old fault lines waiting for permission. He had seen this before. He knew what came next. "Go on," he murmured. "Get up already." The armor cracked along the spine. Rod didn't flinch. The tail erupted. Rod rolled his wrists, loosening his grip. The maw split open. Rod tilted his head slightly. "You're uglier than I remember." Next time, the armor comes off. The real monster steps out. And Rod stops treating this like a fight he has to survive, and starts treating it like something he has to finish.
Wasn't that interesting? Now don't forget to subscribe for more.
And ring the bell for your server.